The cameras never blinked. 47 surveillance feeds illuminated the Queen's private chamber, each one focused on a secret that could destroy an empire. In the sterile corridors of Medical Complex Theta 9, 3 small figures lay motionless in reinforced beds, their breathing synchronized to machines that kept them alive. The Zaphirian Empire stretched across 12 star systems, commanded fleets that could shatter planets, and worshipped genetic perfection as the highest law. But behind encrypted firewalls and biometric locks, Queen Lyrath watched her greatest shame breathe. Her sons, Kale, Nyx, and Orion, 7 years old, paralyzed from birth. In Zaphirian culture, imperfection wasn't just discouraged, it was erased. Children who failed genetic testing disappeared before their first sunrise. But when you wear the crown, you make different choices. Terrible choices. Lyrath had hidden them in the one place no one would question. A medical research facility so classified that even her advisors believed it stored bioweapons. The truth was worse. Was love. Before we witness what happens when one human janitor stumbles into the Empire's most guarded secret, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications bell, because what this man does next will shatter everything the Zaphirian Empire believes about strength, weakness, and what it truly means to be human. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Medical Complex Theta 9 existed in permanent twilight. Built into an asteroid orbiting a dying star, its corridors hummed with the mechanical precision of a civilization that had conquered biology itself. Zaphirians didn't get sick. They didn't age poorly. Their genetic engineering protocols ensured every citizen emerged flawless, tall, strong, cognitively superior. David Chen mopped the same hallways every night and found the whole thing deeply creepy. He'd been working sanitation contracts in alien space for 6 years, ever since Earth's economic collapse made staying home impossible. The work was invisible, paid poorly, and suited him fine. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant no one asked about the wedding ring he still wore, or the daughter's photo he kept in his locker, or why a man with an engineering degree was pushing a cleaning cart through the cold belly of an alien research station. The Zaphirians barely acknowledged his existence. To them he was furniture. A necessary biological component in a facility too sensitive for full automation. He cleaned their labs, emptied their waste receptacles, and made sure the floors gleamed with the antiseptic perfection they demanded. Most nights his route took 90 minutes. Sublevel 1 through sublevel 5, then the administrative wing, then home to his cramped quarters in the human labor district. He'd learned not to look too closely at what happened in the labs. Genetics experiments that would have triggered international scandals back on Earth were considered routine hygiene here. But tonight his access card malfunctioned. The security panel on sublevel 6 blinked green instead of red. David stared at it, confused. Sublevel 6 wasn't on his route. Sublevel 6 wasn't on anyone's route. It existed on architectural plans as restricted biocontainment, which in Zaphirian bureaucracy meant, don't ask questions or lose your contract. He should have reported the error. Should have backed away and called his supervisor. Instead he stepped through. The corridor beyond was different. Warmer. The harsh clinical lighting softened to something almost amber. And there was sound, faint, rhythmic, organic. Breathing. David's cleaning cart wheels squeaked obscenely loud in the quiet. He moved slowly, instinct screaming at him to turn back, curiosity pulling him forward. The hallway ended at a reinforced door marked with Zaphirian glyphs he couldn't read, but the symbols were universally clear. Biohazard, containment, authorized personnel only. The door was cracked open. Just slightly. Through the gap David saw them. 3 beds. 3 small bodies. 3 pairs of eyes, luminous silver, distinctly Zaphirian, staring at the ceiling with an emptiness that punched straight through his chest. Children. They were small, maybe 7 or 8 in human years, with the distinctive features of Zaphirian nobility, high cheekbones, elegant bone structure, skin that shimmered faintly blue under the lights. But they didn't move. Not their legs, not their arms. Only their eyes tracked slowly across the ceiling, following some invisible pattern only they could see. Medical equipment surrounded each bed, monitors displaying vital signs, feeding tubes, waste management systems. Everything automated. Everything efficient. Everything cold. No toys. No colors. No indication that anyone had ever touched them with kindness. David's hand tightened on the doorframe. He knew that emptiness. Had seen it in his own reflection for 2 years after the accident. After Emma. He should have left. Should have pretended he'd seen nothing. Instead he stepped inside. The middle child, smaller than the others with darker blue skin, turned his head slightly. The movement was minimal, perhaps involuntary, but his eyes locked onto David with sudden, startling focus. A human. In their space. David froze. The boy's expression didn't change. Zaphirians weren't expressive like humans, but something shifted in the quality of his attention. Recognition maybe. Or just surprise that anything new existed in their unchanging world. "Hey," David whispered, immediately feeling ridiculous. Did they even understand English? Did they understand anything beyond the medical routines that kept them breathing? The boy blinked. What? Deliberately. David's throat tightened. That blink wasn't reflexive. It was communication. He glanced at the surveillance camera in the corner, a black sphere embedded in the ceiling, its lens aimed directly at the beds. Watching. Always watching. Someone knew these children existed. Someone was monitoring them every second. Someone who clearly wasn't coming to visit. David took another step forward. The medical monitors chirped softly, tracking heartbeats that suddenly accelerated. The children were afraid. Or excited. Or both. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, though he had no idea if they understood. I'm just the janitor. I clean things. Make messes go away." The smallest boy, the one who'd blinked, made a sound. Not words. Just a soft exhalation that might have been an attempt at communication. His eyes flicked toward David's cleaning cart, then back to David's face. David followed his gaze. The cart held the usual supplies: disinfectant, microfiber cloths, trash bags. Nothing interesting to a child. Except the small potted plant sitting on the bottom shelf. It was against facility regulations technically. David wasn't supposed to personalize his equipment. But 6 months ago he'd found a Terran succulent someone had abandoned in the waste disposal, and he hadn't been able to throw it away. So he'd kept it. Watered it. Talked to it sometimes when the loneliness got too heavy. He lifted the pot carefully and approached the middle bed. "You want to see?" David held the plant where the boy could view it properly. "It's from Earth. My home planet. It doesn't need much, just a little water, a little light. Stubborn little thing refuses to die even when everyone expects it to." The boy's silver eyes widened fractionally. His gaze fixed on the green leaves with an intensity that suggested he'd never seen anything alive and growing before. Which, David realized with growing horror, he probably hadn't. 7 years in this room. 7 years of white walls, medical equipment and surveillance cameras. No windows. No nature. No life beyond their own failing bodies. "His name's Frank," David continued, feeling slightly insane but unable to stop. "Frank the Succulent. Not very creative, I know. My daughter named him. She was 5. Everything was either Frank or Princess Sparkle. She said Frank looked like a Frank." The words came easier than they had in months. Usually talking about Emma felt like swallowing glass. But here, in this strange room with these strange children who couldn't respond, couldn't judge, couldn't offer the pitying looks he'd learned to hate, here it almost felt safe. The boy's eyes shifted from the plant to David's face. Listening. Actually listening. David placed Frank on the middle boy's bedside table, adjusting it so the leaves caught the amber light. "There. Now you've got company that isn't medical equipment. Frank's a good listener. Better than most humans, honestly." He stepped back, suddenly aware he'd crossed about 15 different protocol violations. Unauthorized access. Contamination risk. Interaction with classified subjects. Any one of those could get him fired. Possibly imprisoned. "You should go. Right now. Forget this ever happened." But the boy was still staring at Frank with wonder, and David couldn't remember the last time he'd seen anyone, human or alien, look at something with such pure, uncomplicated joy. "I'll come back tomorrow," David heard himself say. "If you want. I could bring other things. Tell you about Earth. About places that aren't white rooms and machines." The boy blinked twice. Rapidly. David chose to interpret that as yes. In her private chamber, Queen Lyrath's hand froze halfway to the surveillance controls. She'd been about to switch feeds. Her nightly routine involved checking each camera angle, ensuring her son's vital signs remained stable, then forcing herself to look away before the guilt consumed her entirely. 7 years of this. 7 years of watching her children exist without living. But now there was someone else in the room. A human. Small by Zaphirian standards, wearing the drab uniform of sanitation workers. He was talking to Nyx, her middle son, her quietest boy, and Nyx was listening. Lyrath's finger hovered over the alarm command. One press would flood sublevel 6 with security forces. The human would be detained, interrogated, possibly executed depending on what he'd seen and who he told. But Nyx was looking at something in the human's hands. A plant. A small, unremarkable plant that somehow commanded more attention than 7 years of medical care had ever achieved. Lyrath didn't press the alarm. Instead, she leaned forward and she watched. David returned the next night with a children's book, battered, earth-made, the pages worn soft from years of reading. He'd bought it in a human district shop, from a vendor who'd looked at him with sad, knowing eyes and hadn't charged him. The title was Where the Wild Things Are. This was Emma's favorite, David said, settling into a chair he'd dragged between the 3 beds. All 3 boys watched him now. Kale, the largest, tracked his movements with cautious intelligence. Orion, the smallest, had actually turned his head, a feat that must have required tremendous effort. Nyx stared at the book like it held the secrets of the universe. David opened to the first page. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind. He read slowly, showing them the illustrations, describing colors they might not have names for, explaining human childhood concepts that probably had no Zaphirian equivalent. Mischief. Imagination. Wildness. When he finished, Orion made a sound. Not quite a word, but something with intention behind it. You want me to read it again? Orion's eyes brightened. David read it again. And then once more, because Kale's vital signs had stabilized in a way the monitors flagged as unusual, and the medical AI couldn't determine if it was concerning or not. Lyrath could have told the AI what it was. It was contentment. Quick pause. Have you ever felt invisible, like no one really saw you? Drop a red heart in the comments if you've been there. And tell us, where in the world are you watching from right now? We read every single comment and love hearing from you. The visits became routine. David arrived each night after his official shift, access card mysteriously granting him entry to sublevel 6 without question. He brought books, simple toys, a music player loaded with earth songs, folk melodies, classical pieces, nothing too harsh for ears that had only known medical equipment beeps. He talked about Emma. About how she'd loved strawberries and hated socks and could name every constellation visible from their backyard. About the accident, the shuttle malfunction, the decompression, how he'd been in the cargo hold and she'd been with her mother in the passenger section. About how he'd survived and they hadn't, and how that felt like the cruelest joke the universe had ever told. The boys listened. Kale with analytical focus, processing every word. Orion with open empathy, his eyes glistening in ways that suggested Zaphirians could cry, they just rarely had reason to. Nyx with an understanding that went beyond language. On the 8th night, David brought clay. Non-toxic, soft, easily moldable. He placed small amounts on trays positioned over each bed. It's called art, he explained. You make shapes. Whatever shapes you want. There's no right or wrong. You just create. Kale stared at the clay like it was a complex mathematical equation. Orion touched it tentatively, his limited hand mobility allowing just enough movement to press fingerprints into the surface. Nyx worked for 20 minutes, his hands trembling with effort, until he'd formed something recognizable. A flower. Crude, asymmetrical, but undeniably a flower. David's vision blurred. That's beautiful, Nyx. That's really beautiful. On the surveillance feed, Lyrath pressed her hand against the screen, fingers aligned with her son's clay-covered hands. She'd given them life. This human was giving them something she'd thought impossible. Living. By the 3rd week the room had transformed. Paper stars hung from the ceiling. David had spent an entire night folding origami, teaching the boys about Japanese culture, about human traditions of making beauty from simple materials. Frank the succulent had been joined by 2 other plants, and Orion had named them Lady Greenbean and Sir Potsalot, names that made David laugh until his ribs hurt. The boys were changing too. Kale had started attempting words, broken, heavily accented English but words nonetheless. David. More. Orion's physical therapy had accidentally improved through play. Reaching for toys, manipulating clay, even attempting to turn pages had strengthened muscles his medical team assumed would never function. Nyx had smiled. It was brief, barely noticeable by human standards. But David had seen it and he'd frozen, and Nyx had done it again, deliberately this time, like he'd been waiting 7 years to share joy with someone who'd recognize it. But changes attract attention. Dr. Vex, the facility's medical director, noticed the unusual vital signs during a routine report review. Increased neural activity. Improved muscle response. Emotional markers that shouldn't exist in patients with their diagnosis. He ordered a full investigation. And he began. Reviewing surveillance footage. David arrived on the 24th night to find the room different. The decorations were gone. The plants had been removed. The boys lay in their beds exactly as he'd first found them, sterile, monitored, alone. Except their eyes. Their eyes tracked him with panic. What happened? David moved between the beds, checking them frantically. Are you okay? Did someone? The door hissed open behind him. Dr. Vex entered, flanked by 2 security officers. He was tall even for a Zaphirian, his silver skin marked with the geometric tattoos of the medical caste. His expression held the warmth of a scalpel. David Chen. Sanitation worker, human, assigned to sublevels 1 through 5. Vex's voice carried the kind of precision that came from delivering bad news professionally. You've been accessing restricted areas. Contaminating classified subjects. Violating approximately 47 facility regulations. David's mouth went dry. I was just creating emotional attachment in test subjects. Vex interrupted. Do you understand what these children are? They're genetic failures. Aberrations. They're kept alive purely for research purposes, to understand how such catastrophic developmental errors occur so we can prevent them in future generations. Something hot and furious ignited in David's chest. They're not test subjects. They're kids. They have names. They have personalities. Kale thinks about everything like it's a puzzle. Orion loves music. Nyx creates art with clay even though it takes him 20 minutes and leaves him exhausted. They're people. They are genetic dead ends, Vex said flatly. And you are terminated. Security will escort you to your quarters. You have 1 hour to collect your belongings before deportation to Earth. The security officers moved forward. Kale made a sound, distressed, guttural. Orion's vital signs spiked dangerously. Nyx turned his head with visible effort and did something David had never seen him do. He spoke. Stay. The word was barely audible, mangled by a vocal system that had never been taught to form language. Stay. David. Stay. The room fell silent. Dr. Vex stared at Nyx with an expression that cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. That's impossible, Vex whispered. His neural pathways don't support language acquisition. The scans showed. The scans showed what you expected to see, David said quietly. You never looked for what they could be. Only what they couldn't. In her chamber, Queen Lyrath stood. She'd watched every interaction. Seen her sons transform from living medical samples into children. Watched a human janitor give them what she, with all her power, all her resources, had been too afraid to provide. Love without condition. Presence without shame. The decision should have been impossible. Revealing her sons meant revealing her violation of the genetic purity laws. It meant political suicide. It meant admitting she'd hidden imperfect heirs while enforcing perfection on everyone else. It meant choosing between her crown and her children. Lyrath accessed her private communication array and sent a single command. Sublevel 6 security override. Authorization royal seal. The door to the medical chamber opened again. This time everyone bowed. Queen Lyrath entered sublevel 6 for the first time in 7 years, her presence so commanding that even the air seemed to rearrange itself around her. She stood 9 feet tall, her skin the deep blue of nobility, her crown a living artifact of crystallized starlight. Dr. Vex dropped to one knee. Your Majesty, we weren't informed. Silence. The word carried the weight of 12 star systems. Vex's mouth snapped shut. Lyrath moved past him, past the security officers, past David who stood frozen in confused terror. She approached the 3 beds and for the first time since their birth, she looked at her sons without a screen between them. Kale watched her with careful recognition. Orion's breathing quickened. Nyx smiled. My sons, Lyrath said, her voice carrying an emotion David didn't know Zaphirians could express. Grief. I have failed you. She turned to David. You are the human. The janitor. David nodded, not trusting his voice. You gave them what I could not. Your Majesty, Dr. Vex interjected carefully, if I may explain the situation. You may not. Lyrath's eyes never left David. This human has committed crimes against facility protocol. He has contaminated research subjects. He has violated security clearances. David's heart sank. If this twist just hit you in the feels, smash that like button thumbs up right now. It really helps us share more incredible stories like this one. And stick around because the most emotional moment is still coming. And in doing so, Lyrath continued, he has done what I was too cowardly to do. He saw my children as people. She knelt, a queen kneeling, and placed her hand on Nyx's forehead. The gesture was tender, heartbreaking in its simplicity. I watched you teach them joy. I watched you give them books and plants and music. I watched you treat genetic failures as worthy of love. And I realized something human. You showed me that the failure was never theirs. Her voice cracked. It was mine. Lyrath stood and faced Dr. Vex. Effective immediately, Medical Complex Theta 9 is under royal investigation. These children are not research subjects. They are Crown Princes Kale, Nyx, and Orion of the Zaphirian Empire. And they will be acknowledged as such. Vex's face went pale. Your Majesty, the genetic purity laws will be challenged. Publicly. The implications hit the room like a shockwave. Challenging the genetic laws meant challenging the foundation of Zaphirian civilization. It meant centuries of tradition overturned. It meant chaos. It meant 3 boys might finally get to live. This will destroy you, Vex said quietly. The Council will never accept imperfect heirs. General Cross alone will use this to ignite a civil war. He's been waiting for weakness. Then let him come, Lyrath said. Let the Council deliberate. Let Cross make his play. But these children will not spend another day hidden in shame. She turned to David. You will serve as their companion. Their teacher. She struggled with the human concept. Their father figure. If you accept. David looked at the 3 boys, Kale watching with hope, Orion trembling with emotion, Nyx reaching one trembling hand toward him. I accept, David whispered. The announcement exploded across the Empire like a supernova. Queen Lyrath appeared before the Grand Council, her 3 sons displayed on screens for all to see. She spoke for 2 hours, her voice never wavering, detailing every medical fact, every legal precedent, every philosophical argument for why genetic perfection wasn't the same as worth. General Cross did attempt a coup. It lasted 6 days. The princes stopped it themselves. Kale, with his analytical mind, had spent years memorizing the medical facilities systems. He provided military intelligence that exposed Cross's supply lines. Orion composed a piece of music so emotionally devastating that when it was broadcast, half of Cross's forces deserted. Nyx created art, images of hope, of different futures, of strength that didn't require perfect bodies. The rebellion collapsed not through violence, but through 3 children proving that worth couldn't be measured by genetic code. 1 year later, Medical Complex Theta 9 had been repurposed. It was now the Imperial Academy of Alternative Abilities, where Zaphirian children with genetic variations received education, support, and the radical concept that different didn't mean lesser. David Chen, now officially titled Royal Companion and Director of Emotional Development, walked the halls with a confidence he'd forgotten he possessed. The wedding ring still hung on his chain, but now he touched it with gratitude instead of grief. Emma would have loved this chaos. In the central garden, yes, garden because Nyx had insisted and queens apparently couldn't say no to sons who smiled, 3 boys worked on their latest project. Kale was programming adaptive technology for students with limited mobility, his mind suited perfectly for problems everyone else called impossible. Orion taught music therapy, his classes filled with children learning that emotional expression wasn't weakness. Nyx ran the art program, his studio walls covered in creations from students who'd been told their entire lives they couldn't create anything valuable. Queen Lyrath visited every week, making up for 7 years of surveillance screens by actually sitting with her sons, learning their languages, laughing at their jokes. The Empire was changing. Slowly, painfully but changing. And it had started with a janitor who'd seen 3 children and decided they deserved to exist. And that's how one janitor's simple act of kindness rewrote the laws of an empire. Now we want to hear from you. Speech balloon, which moment hit you the hardest? Speech balloon, have you ever been someone's unexpected hero? Speech balloon, what alien civilization should we explore next? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and reply to as many as we can. If this story moved you, please do 3 things right now. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And don't go anywhere. We've handpicked more incredible stories you'll love on the end screen. Click one and keep the emotional experience going. Remember, in a universe that demands perfection, sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply seeing someone as they are and deciding that's enough. Until next time, keep believing in the power of compassion. This is Black Horizon HFY, where humanity's greatest strength is its heart. Red Heart. See you in the next story.